Season 3, Episode 15, Yesterday's Enterprise. This episode is always on the short list of best Star Trek episodes of all time, and it's pretty hard to argue. It is a great episode. It shows what happened to the Enterprise C, and it also shows what the Enterprise D crew would look like if they spent their entire careers at war with the Klingon Empire. But as great as it is, there's still some pretty funny things about it, and I think we should just get right into it, because I got a lot to say about this one. The episode opens up in 10 forward with Guinan introducing Worf to an Earth drink called prune juice, and he loves it. He calls it a warrior's drink. Yeah, just wait till that Klingon ass is clinging on to the toilet bowl in a few minutes. Mr. Worf is about to boldly go, if you know what I'm saying. And I have no idea why Worf isn't familiar with prune juice. Remember, he was raised on Earth since he was like 7. I mean, in all that time, you'd think he would have at least heard of prune juice, or at the very least, prunes, but apparently not. And now he knows. And he's about to shit his brains out. And some kind of weird temporal rift opens up not far from the Enterprise's position, of course, as always. And it's clearly seen through the windows of 10 forward. Worf gets called to the bridge, and Guinan looks at it with a puzzled expression on her face, and she says no, like maybe she's seen this type of thing before. Because Guinan always knows shit. No matter what's going on, if Guinan is involved, she'll know something. And the ship begins to emerge from the rift, and as soon as it does, the Enterprise is transformed. The bridge is much darker, the layout is slightly different, and everyone has a weird space belt on. And Worf is gone, which is good, because he was probably only about 10 minutes away from sharding himself into Sto-vo-kor. And Tasha Yar appears in his place, back from the dead. And no one on the bridge seems to have noticed the change. And the ship that came from the rift turns out to be the USS Enterprise NCC 1701, no bloody A, B, C. Oh, it's the C. Never mind. It is the C. And the Enterprise C has been missing for 22 years. It was last seen near a Klingon outpost called Narendra 3. But that's all they seem to know about it. And the ship is heavily damaged. But there are life signs. They are hailed by the captain of the Enterprise C, Captain Rachel Garrett, and she says they were attacked by Romulan warbirds, and that their life support is failing. And Picard is sending Riker and a team over to help. He tries to keep things secret, though. He doesn't want Captain Garrett to know that his ship is also called the Enterprise. And they evacuate the injured crew, including Captain Garrett, over to the Enterprise D. And Guinan decides to meet with Picard in his ready room, or in this case, his war room. She tells him that things have changed, but she can't really elaborate any further. She says there should be families on board the Enterprise, and Picard is shocked by this because the Federation is at war with the Klingon Empire. It would be ridiculous to have families on board. I mean, it's also ridiculous to have families on board even when it's not wartime. There's still a lot of crazy shit in space that can kill you, even if you're in peace times, but whatever. Basically, Guinan says they shouldn't be at war, and the Enterprise sees the cause. She says it has to go back through the temporal rift. And Picard meets with Captain Garrett and explains the situation to her. He says the Enterprise C has come 22 years into the future. She is surprised by this, of course, and he asks her if, what they were doing, because there's no record of what actually happened to them. And she explains that they were responding to a distress call from the Klingon outpost Narendra 3. And the outpost was under attack by 4 Romulan warbirds, and the Enterprise C engaged them in combat in an effort to defend the outpost. And suddenly, the temporal rift opened up, and they went through it, obviously, and they ended up here. I mean, it's really kind of crazy that they come 22 years into the future and also find themselves face-to-face with another Enterprise. I mean, what are the odds, right? And Picard says it's a shame they weren't successful. A Federation starship defending a Klingon outpost might have avoided 20 years of war. And then we meet Richard Castillo, the Enterprise C's helmsman, and he's played by Shooter McGavin.
Big trouble, though, pal. I eat pieces of shit like you for breakfast.
You eat pieces of shit for breakfast?
No.
And he's been working closely with Tasha Yar trying to restore some power to the Enterprise C. And it seems like they like each other. And he says this to her.
Most everyone calls me Castillo. My mother calls me Richard.
Okay, Castillo.
No. I think maybe I'd like it better if you called me Richard.
Whoa, Shooter McGavin is a smooth son of a bitch, isn't he? Yeah, call me the thing that only my mother calls me. That's not weird at all. How about Dick? How about we call him Dick? Then again, what the hell do I know? Because it's obviously working. She's into him. Like I said, Shooter McGavin knows what he's doing. And Picard calls a meeting with his senior staff to tell them that the Enterprise C has to go back through the temporal rift, where it will end up in its own time again. Guinan has convinced Picard that it will restore the correct timeline, and that even a failed attempt to defend the Klingon outpost will still prevent 20 years of war. And the crew briefly wonders why Guinan knows that things have changed.
But how could Guinan know that history's been altered if she's been altered along with the rest of us?
Perhaps her species has a perception that goes beyond linear time.
There are many things about her species we can't easily explain. Yet it is very possible that she is correct. A ship from the past has traveled through time. How can we know what effect those events will have on the present?
So they do question it, but they don't really know. Guinan's species just has superpowers, and it opens up a whole can of worms, because does that mean that every member of the El-Orian species also knows that the timeline has been changed? Or is it just Guinan? The world may never know. And now Picard has to explain this whole thing to Captain Garrett. And she says that many of her crew have expressed the desire to return to their own timeline and finish what they started. Which is somewhat hard to believe, but okay. But despite that, she thinks it's a bad idea. She says that if the Federation is at war, they need all the help they can get. And Picard reveals why he's really so desperate to change things.
But if you go back, it could be a great deal more helpful. The war is going very badly for the Federation, far worse than is generally known. Starfleet Command believes that defeat is inevitable within 6 months.
So, not only are they at war with the Klingons, but they're losing. And defeat is imminent. Not good. I mean, you do not want to lose a war to the Klingon Empire. If you're going to fight the Klingons, you better win. Because their entire way of life is in jeopardy right now. And that's enough to convince Captain Garrett to take the Enterprise back to its own time and continue the fight with the Romulans. Although you'd think there would be at least some dissenting opinions among the crew about doing this. I mean, but if there are, we never see it. And I know they have their orders. They have to go back if she commands them to, but you'd think there'd be some people who say, no way. If we go back, we're going to die. And I don't want to die. In any case, we never hear about that. And Yar and Dick Castillo say their goodbyes. He knows he's going to die, but he says this anyway.
If you get back to Earth, and you see a man, say in his late 50s, taking a hard, long look across a crowded room, hey, you never know.
If you see a man, say in his late 50s, eating pieces of shit for breakfast, hey, you never know. Ah, romance. Am I right? Anyway, the Enterprise C is about to make its way into the rift when both ships are attacked by a Klingon bird of prey. And of course, there's a bridge explosion. and Captain Garrett is killed with what looks like a ninja shuriken to the fucking forehead. What the hell are these starships made out of? There's rocks everywhere. Rocks! We got bulkheads made out of cobblestone and combustible circular saw blades. What the fuck? And as a result, Captain Garrett is dead. Tragic. And the bird of prey cloaks and makes a retreat, but the Enterprise C has only one remaining member of its senior staff left, and you guessed it, it's old Shooter Castillo. And he volunteers to lead the Enterprise C back through the temporal rift. I guess it makes sense. He's the most senior officer left alive. That's why there's a chain of command, right? And while they're making some repairs, Tasha Yar decides to pay Guinan a visit. She's been getting strange looks from Guinan the entire episode, and she wants her to tell her what happens to her in the correct timeline. And Guinan says this.
Where am I supposed to be?
Dead.
Do you know how?
No. But I do know it was an empty death. A death without purpose.
Okay, how does she know that? That's a very specific piece of information from Guinan, who, up until this point, hasn't been able to be specific about anything. All she knows is that this isn't the way things are supposed to be. But somehow, she also knows that a person that she never even met in the correct timeline is supposed to be dead. The mystical Guinan powers never cease to amaze. And also, why would she tell her this? Can you learn how to lie for once in your life? I mean, this could have ended in disaster. But luckily, it doesn't. Tasha Yar simply requests a transfer to the Enterprise C. She explains to Picard that she's dead in the correct timeline, and that it was a meaningless, empty death, and if she's going to die anyway, she'd like her death to count for something. And for some reason, Picard grants this request, which doesn't make much sense to me. I mean, he kept going on about restoring the past to fix the future. But sending someone from the present into the past seems like it might fuck things up even more. And it kind of does. We'll see that in future episodes. We're going to talk about that in a minute. Don't you worry. And acting Captain Shooter Dick Castillo McGavin also accepts Yar's request to join his crew. And he doesn't take much convincing. She never even has to explain that she's supposed to be dead in the original timeline. You'd think that if he really cares about her, he would protest a little more. You'd think he would want to keep her safe, right? But no, he welcomes her aboard. Let's go die together, I guess. And just as they're making their way towards the rift, the Klingon bird of prey shows up, and this time it has backup. What shitty timing these Klingons have. And the Enterprise C is moving at an incredibly slow pace. This is quite possibly the slowest escape from danger into even more danger that I've ever seen. Remember, they are running away so they can survive long enough to get killed, essentially. And as a result of the Enterprise C's snail's pace, the Enterprise D is getting its ass kicked trying to defend them. And there's a coolant leak in engineering. I mean, nobody deals with more coolant leaks than Geordi LaForge. It seems to be the main concern on this Galaxy-class ship. It happened once in the original series, but I feel like it's happened like 3 or 4 times in TNG if you include Generations. And what that basically means is the ship's gonna fucking explode. But before the big explosion, there's gonna be a lot of little explosions. Of course. The bridge turns into a Michael Bay movie, once again. There's gravel flying everywhere, and Riker is killed by more shrapnel, just like Captain Garrett. Seriously, these ships are death traps. There's a very clear design flaw in the way they build these ships. And just as the Enterprise D is about to be destroyed, the Enterprise C finally crosses the event horizon of the temporal rift, and the timeline is instantly restored. The lights are turned on. Worf is back on the bridge with his soon-to-be rumbling bowels. And he says that it looked like a ship was coming out of the rift for a moment, but it's gone now, and the rift closes. And in 10 forward, once again, a very aware Guinan sits down with Geordi, and she asks him about Tasha Yar. The end. Great episode. I definitely understand why it's so well regarded, but at the same time, I tend to have a problem with episodes where basically none of the crew has any idea what happened. I mean, Guinan is the only one who kind of knows that these events even took place. And there's something kind of annoying about that to me. I don't really know why. And whenever there's time travel involved, there's always going to be shit that doesn't make sense. I mean, if I really wanted to pick nits, I would say that Guinan shouldn't even be there in the alternate timeline. I mean, Worf is gone. He's presumably a soldier in the Klingon Empire. He may even be serving on one of the ships that's attacking the Enterprise in this episode. And Guinan shouldn't be there either. I mean, she's a civilian in a time of war. Picard gasps at the thought of families living on the Enterprise, but he doesn't have any problem with this civilian bartender. But like I said, that is nitpicking, because she obviously needs to be there with all her cosmic awareness that is never explained. You know, I wonder if when the Borg assimilated Guinan's homeworld, that's how the Borg gained their sort of cosmic temporal awareness. You know, maybe they got it from the Elorians. Who knows? And of course, this is another Bring Back Denise Crosby episode, which I like. I like that she comes back every now and then. She was absolutely shafted in season 1. And this episode tries to give her a better send-off than she got in the episode where she originally died. And it would be a good send-off, a good, purposeful, noble death. But later on in the series, it's revealed that she survived the battle with the Romulans, was taken prisoner, and how should I put this? She was forced to couple with a Romulan soldier, had a child with him, and was killed while attempting escape. I mean, holy shit. I suppose I should talk about that if and when I ever get to that episode, but it's just kind of fucked up to rewrite history to give her a better death and then to take it away from her just so she could come back on the show again because she plays her own half-Romulan daughter. I mean, Jesus, those are some strong genes. What the fuck? She's the spitting image. Anyway, despite all of that, I do think it's a great episode, and it's always fun to revisit it. But I think I've yapped long enough about this, don't you think? And I'm going to try to squeeze in a Christmas-themed video soon, so keep an eye out for that. And thanks for watching. And let me know what you thought of this one. And, you know, whatever you do, don't eat pieces of shit for breakfast, because that's not good for you. Anyway, until next time, take it easy.
Let's make sure history never forgets the name.
Shooter McGavin.